Today, we are going to tackle the million-dollar question. Are eggs good for diabetics? As a diabetic, are you supposed to avoid or severely limit eggs because they contain cholesterol? But they are low in carbohydrates and high in protein. That would make eggs a great inclusion to our diet, correct? What is right? One day they are bad, the next day they are good. What is the answer? Stay tuned to the very end and I will end all that confusion today. One big determining factor when it comes to our health as diabetics is what is inside that egg. And that is based on how that egg was probably falsely marketed. Free range, cage free, omega-3 enriched, organic, vegetarian fed, pasture raised. What does all that mean? How that chicken was raised plays a big role in the development of that egg. So, buying the wrong egg could be doing more damage to our already compromised bodies without you even knowing it. Cholesterol actually could be the least of your worries when it comes to the egg. But before we begin, let me welcome all you resilient diabetics out there. This is where we turn ordinary, struggling diabetics into extraordinary, well-controlled diabetics. If you don't know who I am and you are brand new to this channel, I welcome you. My name is Jay Sampat and I am an insulin-dependent diabetic diagnosed a little over 5 years ago. So, the proud owner of a pancreas that has gone on a permanent and lifelong vacation. So not only am I diabetic just like you, where we will be walking that walk and talking that talk together, but I do also have a University of Bachelor of Science degree in nutrition dietetics. And that does come in very handy in discussing all the intricacies of being a diabetic. My goal is to put 4 years of chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry, and human physiology into an easy 10-minute or so presentation so that you understand more about how your diabetic body works better than dare I say, your doctor. I did. The information presented today will only be found here on The Resilient Diabetic. New, life-changing episodes are released weekly. So if you want to learn more and you want to be notified by YouTube that a new video has been published, the only way to do that is you have to hit that subscribe button first, followed by the gray notification bell. Then you have to choose turn on all notifications. And of course, if you liked what you've heard today, please hit that like button. So there are 2 conflicting thoughts and stances on eggs out there. The first is a hard stance by various professionals in our health-based institutions. And remember what an institution is. They do not change their stance even with unfavorable evidence staring them right in the face. So what would many of you have been told by one camp? They state eggs should not be consumed in excess, especially if you're diabetic. Why? It has to do with the cholesterol and the saturated fat in the egg. One large egg has around 200 milligrams of cholesterol. So there is not much room for any other dietary cholesterol to be eaten in the day. The older recommendations suggested that an individual with diabetes should consume no more than 200 milligrams of cholesterol each day. So depending on your healthcare team and your nutritional advisor, you may have been told to strictly limit eggs to at least 2 to 3 a week. They still believe high levels of egg consumption may raise the risk or worsening of your diabetic health, thus heart disease. If you remember, there was even a time where the media was behind this, saying to avoid eggs, particularly the yolk of the eggs, due to their high cholesterol content. However, the thinking has changed and changed ever so slightly lately. In fact, the new dietary guidelines for Americans have lifted the recommendation to limit dietary cholesterol to no more than, wait for this, we get 300 milligrams per day. The guidelines state, and I'll quote, available evidence shows no appreciable relationship between the consumption of dietary cholesterol and serum cholesterol. Cholesterol is not a nutrient of concern for overconsumption, end quote. What do they mean by all that? Research is beginning to show that your genetic makeup, not diet, is the driving force behind cholesterol levels. I would actually further argue that your carbohydrate intake is more correlated to your cholesterol levels than your dietary intake of fats. In other words, the more carbs you consume, good or bad, wholesome or not, the higher your cholesterol levels. The body creates cholesterol in amounts much larger than what you eat. About 85% of the cholesterol in circulation in your body is actually manufactured by the liver. Only 15% is directly coming from the cholesterol in your diet. If you get more from your diet, the liver cuts back. If you get less from the diet, the liver basically makes up the difference. So our next question is, what is nutritionally in that egg besides cholesterol? One whole egg contains around 7 grams of protein. While most of the protein, a little more than half, comes from the white, the yolk also contains protein, but is part of the egg packed full of healthy fats. The fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and antioxidants, and another substance called lutein. Egg yolks do contain cholesterol, the fat, and the saturated fat of the egg. Eggs are also very rich in vitamin B12 and minerals such as iron, copper, and zinc. The other key nutrient in eggs is called choline, which is involved in body processes such as memory and mood and plays a crucial role in development of fetal brain development. In total, one large egg has around 75 calories, 5 grams of fats, and a mere 1.6 grams which are saturated fats. There was a really interesting study just reported by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They examined the effects of high egg consumption in people with type 2 diabetes. They found it conflicting because it produced results that go against the institutional standings. They found people with type 2 diabetes may benefit from regular egg consumption because the eggs improve the protein and micronutrient content of the diet. That leads to better satiety and weight management. This randomized control study used overweight, pre-diabetics, and type 2 diabetics, and their aim was to determine whether or not a high egg diet, 2 eggs every single day for 6 days a week, compared with that of the suggested low egg diet, which was less than 2 eggs per week. They wanted to see how it affected circulating lipid profiles. There was no significant difference in the change in LDL cholesterol between the high and the low egg groups. Surprise, surprise. There was no difference shown for the total cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol, or the triglycerides either. What was good about the study? Both groups were given a matched protein intake. But the high egg group reported less hunger and greater satiety post-breakfast, which means less snacking or the reduced urge to eat more carbohydrate-based foods. So what have I seen in my own body that I can share with you today? There is a direct correlation between the amounts of carbs I eat and my cholesterol levels. The more insulin I need, the worse my health markers. When I was first diagnosed, I used the exact playbook I learned as a nutrition major for diabetic patients directly on myself. Whole grains, fruits, oats, fiber-based cereals, and that was an absolute and complete disaster. Not only were my blood sugars all over the place, massive swings, but they were uncontrollable, which left me miserable. But that method required 3 times the amount of insulin needed, thus destroying my health markers. I was even mandated to be put on a high-dose statin by my doctor. But then come to find out that statin was creating even more resistance, which raised my blood sugars up even further, creating what's known as double diabetes. That vicious circle had to be broken. I am not an institution, so I will change as the facts change. So what was happening here? The excessive insulin and sugars were creating massive amounts of inflammation in my body, thus the necessity of the liver to produce cholesterol. Remember, cholesterol's role is needed to heal the body. It is required in every single cell in the body. As cells become more inflamed, the body then needs to make more and more cholesterol to quote unquote quench the fire, so to speak, and heal those tissues. Okay, knowing this, what is the big picture our experts have overlooked, especially when it comes to food like eggs? One, by dropping carbs for the eggs, you drop insulin requirements. Inflammation then drops, thus the need for the liver to make cholesterol. So foods like eggs, because of the high protein and fat content, give the body a break from the necessity of insulin. The body gets a break. So even though the eggs do contain cholesterol, you must remember that 80% of the cholesterol is made by our livers. So the body's inflammation basically gets curtailed down. So the liver in turn drops its requirements to produce cholesterol. But you do have to work in conjunction with your doctor to figure out the right amounts based on your specific diagnosis. That leads us to the next question. Could the wrong store-bought eggs create inflammation? A compromised egg can create more inflammation to the body, just like I mentioned vegetable oils do. So which eggs do we choose to feed our family and our diabetic bodies with? The egg section of the grocery store has over 25 different kinds of eggs with all kinds of confusing labels: free range, cage free, omega-3 enriched, organic, vegetarian fed, pasture raised. If you're like most, you look for the ones that are on sale and you grab the very first carton without any broken eggs. But that changes today with a little understanding of what you are buying. And I'll give you a little example. Standing in front of my egg selection at the grocery store last week was pretty daunting, because now they're marketing vegetarian grain-fed eggs. And that made me a little angry because chickens are not vegetarians. They're trying to manipulate me by selling inferior eggs. Most farm animals are fed grain-based diets and are raised within confined spaces, as opposed to being allowed to roam free and graze on plants and or bugs. Feeding animals grains such as corn saves farmers money, space, and a lot of time. However, chickens are not strictly vegetarian, so a corn-fed diet can compromise their health and reduce the nutritional quality of their meat and their eggs. Furthermore, the housing conditions of corn-fed chickens often necessitate the use of medication and additives, which also might further affect the eggs. The majority of eggs raised in the United States are conventionally raised. Chickens are put into large buildings with thousands of other chickens all living together. Each chicken lives in a cage about the size of a piece of paper, where they live 100% of the time. Chickens, like people, are healthiest when they eat certain foods. Chickens are what's known as omnivorous, meaning they will eat a variety of plants, seeds, insects, worms, typically found in pastures. Corn feed provides more than enough calories, which causes these inactive chickens to bulk up very quickly. But it is low in fatty acids and certain amino acids, vitamins, and minerals for chickens to thrive. Consequently, extra vitamins, minerals, and amino acids are then added in a corn feed so the chickens can develop properly, lay eggs, and then they mount an immune response against diseases because they're all so confined. Still, corn-fed, or now marketed as vegetarian-fed, chickens need antibiotics in order to thwart the infections that grow very quickly. Second, feeding chickens primarily corn produces an imbalance of omega-3 to omega-6s in the eggs, and we've discussed this already. Healthy ratios are between 1 to 2, but corn-fed chickens have a ratio of up to 1 to 20. Omega-3 fats are important for our cardiovascular health because that is what reduces our inflammation. Too much omega-6 fats negate their benefits, thus creating more inflammation in our bodies. The color of the yolk is one of the best indicators. A pale yellow yolk is a sign that the chickens did not eat foods rich in plants and other bits. But a word of advice, because word is getting out that the consumer is looking for darker yolks. So manufacturers are manipulating their feeds in order to get those colors that everyone is looking for. Now, let's talk about the very confusing food labeling of eggs. Food labeling in the egg industry is daunting to navigate, to say the least. When you read the words cage-free on an egg, you think happy chickens frolicking in a grass meadow all day until they're gently herded into a clean, sweet-smelling coop where they lay a few dozen eggs, which then I can purchase for a very reasonable price. Cage-free actually means chickens have access to an outdoor space which can encompass a lot of conditions, not all necessarily helpful for you or that chicken. The term cage-free means chickens are not placed in battery cages as they are in most institutional farms. However, it doesn't mean that chickens are necessarily given the room to roam or allowed to go outside either. If a chicken can move freely inside the chicken coop, it's considered cage-free. Now for the term free range, which is even a trickier term. The USDA states that a producer must demonstrate to the agency that the poultry has been allowed access to the outside. But here's the problem. The food and water given to chickens always remains inside the shed. The chickens would see no reason to venture into an unfamiliar outside world to scavenge for food when they already fed. In other words, and here's the big bomb drop, a factory farm can open the doors of a chicken coop and have it lead to a parking lot full of cars and trucks. Meanwhile, the chickens have been conditioned to stay within the safety of their coop. And unfortunately, that is still technically considered free range. How about the label no antibiotics? That means the chicken wasn't given any of the substances in egg or hatched form. But the big second bomb drop for you. There are no agencies that actually checks that claim to be true. When you see the phrase no hormones on an egg or chicken, it's almost meaningless too. It is illegal to give hormones to any kind of poultry or livestock that is sold for meat here in the United States. How about the term omega-3 enriched? That just refers to the feed the chickens eat, not, I repeat, not the actual nutritional content of the chicken or the eggs itself. They were more than likely fed flax meal or kelp in hopes that those nutrients would transfer into the meat. It's an absolute mess. So it's actually up to the manufacturer to decide what they put on the packaging. The more creative, the better they stand out. It's up to the consumer to decide if they trust the manufacturer to label the eggs correctly, which makes it even more confusing for everyone. So our modern farming process of these grain-only fed diet has the opposite effect. It makes the chickens less healthy, and they in turn produce an anemic, vitamin-devoid, pale, inflammatory egg. And that increases our body's inflammation. This makes it very important that we seek out foods that improve our health. Pasture-raised, organic, fresh farm eggs are usually ones that can improve our health. Conventionally farmed grain-fed eggs, on the other hand, as you now know, may not. So what is my advice? You have to do your homework. There will be a selection of eggs that one can buy from the local supermarkets. I have found one that I'm comfortable with, that I can feed my family with. It's not too expensive, but it's definitely not the cheapest. Now, even the healthy specialty stores that you think have great eggs use these deceptive tactics on their packaging. If you can buy chicken or eggs from small farmers or a farmer's market, then do so. Ask them how they raise their animals. Eggs from chickens that have led healthy lives with lots of air, sunshine, fresh food, and room to roam taste superior. The yolks are rich, they're buttery, and they have kind of a nutty tasting and are usually very deep orange in comparison to the yolks of the store-bought brands. Those are much superior for your health. Now, my dear friends, you are experts. I'll create a playlist for you with other related videos specifically on diabetes and inflammation. In the video, Fats and Oils for Diabetics, we will discuss, is there such a thing as a healthy fat or oil for diabetics? Which fats would you want to avoid and which fats are the best? Can they help or hurt diabetics towards controlling blood sugars? And the big question, which fats in particular can cause insulin resistance and inflammation? In the episode, Are Nuts Good for Diabetics? You will know which are the 2 best nuts for diabetics and what to look out for on that ingredient list that you're not aware of that creates inflammation. If you're on a desktop or laptop, use your mouse to click that box. If you're a mobile device, tap that with your fingers. So, have a great and productive day, and we'll see you soon with another new episode, which I've said are released weekly. Bye for now.